Title this World War I Part 2. Alright, where we left off, we just talked about the assassination on Archduke Ferdinand. I'd call that the trigger to start the war. I wouldn't necessarily say it was a cause of the war, but it was definitely a trigger. We talked about the tangle of alliances and how that led to it, the other causes, and things like that. So now we're going to get into what happens after all this occurs. Okay, in August of 1914, this is when Germany declared war on France and Serbia, or I'm sorry, not Serbia, but Belgium, and then it brings everybody else in. So the system of alliances now kicks in. The countries come to each other's defense. The outbreak of war in the U.S., okay, was going to be a little bit different. All right, we're going to kind of stay neutral again. We're going to get back to our neutrality, kind of take a step back, a step away from things. So very different than what we have seen as with the turn of the century, with the Spanish-American War and our imperialism. Now we kind of take another step back, and we will be neutral, but we will be sympathetic more so to the Allies. Okay, we didn't like the German government. We believed that Kaiser Wilhelm was basically an autocrat. We were against the militarism that we've seen that has happened in Germany, even though if you look back at TR was kind of doing that thing too. Many Americans had close ties to Germany and Italy due to the immigration, but still identify themselves more as Americans at this point. We will get involved in some minor things. One is called the Lafayette Escadrille, and I believe this was actually depicted in a movie called Flyboys. The American volunteer airmen fought with the French in World War I, but they were flying for the French. Okay, this is some of the first flying that we see in World War I. Okay, originally the plane was used more as observation. Now we're going to start to see it used as an airplane. Now the airplane really didn't play a huge role in World War I, and we'll see that change. You know, the airplane is a key player in World War II, but not so much here. Lafayette Escadrille was named in honor of the General Lafayette, who helped General Washington back during the American Revolution. Okay, they were basically returning the favor to the French by helping them in this war. There is the insignia for the Escadrille Lafayette. Notice, and this isn't depicted that great here, but you see this is actually a swastika, which, as we'll see, and as we continue to talk about this moving toward World War II, the swastika actually had many different meanings and could be traced back into many different cultures. In America, in the early 1900s, the swastika actually meant good luck. So you see that here depicted there. Another way that we will help out is called the American Field Service. Okay, basically this was the volunteer ambulance drivers, and the AFS was there to help any wounded on the front lines during World War I. Okay, so those are some ways that we will immediately help out. Not major ways, but we are involved. The U.S. was upset by the English blockade of neutral ports. Okay, there's also some censorship of our mail and even mining, not like mining for minerals, but like explosive mines set in the North Sea. England basically said, hey, I'm sorry, we're at war. Okay, we got the right to protect ourselves. You don't like the blockade, then quit trading with Germany. They put the mines in the water around the English Channel and the North Sea, and basically trying to starve out the Germans. We were upset by it, and basically England said, "Get over it." It was that simple. We're trying to win this war, and you're continuing to trade. We don't really have that much sympathy. So this is going to lead to submarine warfare, and this is an answer basically to your second World War I essential question: how did the conflict expand and draw in much of Europe and the U.S.? This is a major answer, especially the U.S. It's called submarine warfare. Germans were very advanced in their U-boats. Their submarines were far more advanced than anybody else's, and they were using the U-boats to break that English blockade. There was an international law that said, not sure what's going on there, that said neutrals carrying war material could be taken, but people were to be removed. Okay, the law basically stated that you could stop ships and seize their cargo, but you could not attack and sink the ships. Unfortunately, that's exactly what the Germans were doing. Okay, they began what is called unrestricted submarine warfare, which basically any ship that came across that they would think that had war materials on it, they would sink it. Okay, these events, that's what's going to bring the United States into the war. Okay, in May 1915, the Lusitania is sunk. Okay, the Lusitania is actually the sister ship to the Titanic. Germans warned Americans not to board the ship. German intelligence showed that there were war materials on the ship. Americans still boarded, and 128 of them were killed. Okay, now, were there war materials on the ship? I can pretty much guarantee you that the answer would be yes. All right, but that's going to anger Americans at home. 128 of them were killed on a passenger ship. It's not a warship, but like I said, it probably was carrying war materials. In August of 1915, a ship called the Arabic is sunk. Okay, there's another British passenger ship on its way to New York from Liverpool. 40 people were killed. 2 were Americans. So once again, Americans are popping up on these boats, and it upsets the American public. At this point, Germany promises to stop. Okay, they said that they will stop their unrestricted submarine warfare. In March of 1916, the Sussex is sunk. This is a French ship. And actually, in the news it said it was sunk. It actually was not sunk. Okay, it was a ferry, and it was ferrying people across the English Channel. 50 people were killed. However, no Americans were included on that, and it did make it back. But 50 people were killed. And this really, once again, angered Americans. So Germany pledged what's called the Sussex Pledge. And basically, they said they would end the sinking of passenger ships. They would basically search merchant ships for contraband and make provisions for passengers. Long story short, they had to warn these boats before they would sink them. So they would signal the ships, abandoned ship, we are going to sink your ship. Please get off. That's basically what they said. And we're going to see that's not going to last very long. Okay. And the reason they did this is because there was a war feeling in America, and Germany didn't want America in the war. So they were trying to do anything they could to keep us out of it. There's an anti-war feeling. We understood that war was around the corner, but the American public began calling for a ban on traveling to foreign countries. Because if you're traveling to foreign countries, at this point, more likely you're going to be on a boat, and you're going to put yourselves in harm's way. So they will try to keep us out of the war by banning foreign travel. Well, that's not going to last long, as we're going to see. In February, less than a year, almost a year, the Sussex Pledge is broken. Germans resumed unrestricted submarine warfare in that February. In February of 1917, we will break off diplomatic relations. President Wilson had warned the Germans we were going to do this if the U-boats continued to attack. When they broke the Sussex Pledge, we broke off relations. That's basically the last step before going to war. In that same month, February of 1917, very famously called the Zimmermann Note. Okay, Arthur Zimmermann was the German Secretary of State. He sent a telegram to the German foreign minister in Mexico. The German foreign minister in Mexico was to inform the president of Mexico that the Germans were going to resume their unrestricted submarine warfare. He offered Mexico the territory that they have lost, including New Mexico, Texas, and Arizona, if the United States entered the war because of the unrestricted submarine warfare, and Mexico would then declare war on the U.S. So basically, Germany is saying to Mexico, if the U.S. gets into the war, we want you to declare war on them. And basically what that is going to do is that's going to keep us out of Europe. We're not going to send troops to Europe when our neighboring country in Mexico has declared war on us. Okay? This would keep the Americans fighting at home instead of Europe. Okay, we already had troops in Mexico, and there was all this stuff going on with Pancho Villa. If hopefully you remember learning that last year, who was raiding towns along the border in Texas and Arizona and places like that inside the U.S. So we already had troops inside of Mexico, and there were some rumblings of war down there. Not much, but basically we were kind of imposing our will on Mexico already. British agents intercepted the Zimmermann Note and gave it to the U.S. Obviously, it angered Americans, and the rumblings for war grew louder. There's still some people that believe that the Zimmermann Note might have been fake, but I don't believe that. I think it was legitimate, but obviously far-fetched. In March of 1917, we started arming there is a coded version of the Zimmermann Note, by the way. In March of 1917, merchant ships were beginning to armed. This brings us close to the war. We're now putting our ships into harm's way. And then April of 1917, Wilson goes before a joint session of Congress and asks for a declaration of war, and we get that. Okay, so we are now involved late into World War I, but we are now involved. In perfect timing for the Allies, because in March of 1917, the Russian Revolution begins. Okay, the communists take over. You guys learned about this last year, so hopefully this is a review. Tsar Nicholas II was overthrown. He and his family were executed by the Bolsheviks, which are the communists in Russia, led by this man named Vladimir Lenin. And basically, long story short, Russia gets out of the war to focus on events at home, things that have been going very bad for them. Okay, just a little bit of background. Between 1914 and 1917, 1.5 million people, military men, were killed in Russia. Okay, 2.5 million were POWs, millions were wounded, very high rate of people going AWOL or deserting the army. They had over 2 million civilian dead. The Tsar Nicholas II was sending people to the front without any weapons. Imagine attacking a trench without even a gun to protect yourself. So things were going horribly wrong for Russia. And frankly, to put it bluntly, the people were sick and tired of it. They wanted out. And perfect storm, Vladimir Lenin comes to the rescue. In fact, side note, Vladimir Lenin was actually exiled out of Russia because of his acts against the the king or the Tsar before this, and so he was living in exile. Germany found him, put him on a train, and sent him back into Russia, knowing he was going to cause some problems. So Germany was behind this as well, and it was just a perfect storm. Okay, and this doesn't happen like overnight. There's a lot of fighting, a civil war that occurs within Russia for quite some time, but this is going to basically get them out of World War I, and this is exactly what Germany wanted, because now they could focus on that one front, on the Western Front. But this is also the perfect time when Americans come in to kind of take the Russians' place. There is the Soviet flag. We'll talk more about that. There's Lenin with the sickle. All right, guys, that is it. 5 Q&A tonight. Answer essential question number 2. And stay classy, Vandalia.